My author is Flannery O'Connor. She was born on March 25th, 1925, and she died on August 3rd, 1964. When Flannery O'Connor was young, she was encouraged to write by her father, who passed away from lupus while she was only 15. Lupus is a disease that causes the body to attack itself. The physical symptoms are stiffness and pain in joints and overall weakness. Lupus is also known as autoimmune disease. Flannery O'Connor's writing career kicked off while she was in college. She started off going to college at Georgia State College for Women, but was offered a scholarship to the State University of Iowa for journalism. But she did not enjoy it and switched to creative writing. Eventually, she was also diagnosed with lupus, but her mom didn't tell her that it was lupus, so she thought that she had arthritis. While she believed she was suffering with arthritis, she spent every day writing. She couldn't really do anything else and needed crutches to walk. Eventually, her mother finally told her that she had lupus, and she only spent even more time writing. Some contemporary authors are Stephen King, Joyce Carol Oates, and Eudora Welty. Stephen King would have been pretty young during the time that Flannery O'Connor was still alive, but he also started writing at a young age. They both wrote about pretty gruesome things. They also both wrote in a Gothic style. However, Flannery O'Connor incorporates themes about her faith because she was Catholic. Stephen King did not include much religion and was more focused on making his writing psychologically thrilling. Joyce Carol Oates is another writer that lived at the same time as Flannery O'Connor. Joyce Carol Oates is similar to Stephen King because she also wrote about psychological horror and did not focus on religion. Flannery O'Connor uses her own strange topics to illustrate spiritual growth. Eudora Welty began writing before Flannery O'Connor. They both focused on southern settings. Eudora Welty was similar to Flannery O'Connor because they both talked about the progression of human nature. Welty did not have any of the grotesque elements to her writing that Flannery O'Connor did. Some of her famous works are A Good Man is Hard to Find, Wise Blood, and The Violent Bear It Away. A Good Man is Hard to Find is about a family who is going on a trip to Florida. The grandmother in the family wants to go to Tennessee to visit relatives, but she doesn't want to tell them that that is the reason. She says that she doesn't want to go to Florida because a killer called the Misfit is there, but the family doesn't care. Eventually, they do encounter the Misfit, and the grandmother, along with the whole family, is killed. Wise Blood is about a World War II veteran who returned home to find his house abandoned. During the main character's time in the war, he became an atheist and wants to spread a gospel of anti-religion. Throughout the novel, the main character keeps encountering religious people who are preaching, and it makes him angry. Eventually, the main character starts to go crazy, and he runs out into a thunderstorm and falls into a ditch. When the police find him, they strike him on the head with a baton, and he dies in the back of a police car. His landlord, who has fallen in love with him, continues to care for his dead body because she thinks he's still alive. The Violent Bear It Away is about a preacher who kidnaps his nephew so that he can be the next preacher. The original preacher is about to die, so he asks his nephew to bury him properly so he can be resurrected on Judgment Day. After he dies, the nephew is digging the grave, but he hears a voice and it tells him to forget the man, so he does. The nephew leaves the house where he was held by his uncle and goes into town. Eventually, he finds a new family and lives with them for a while, but he decides he has to return to the house where he was held to escape from his demons. When he gets there, he finds out that someone saved his uncle's body and gave him a proper burial, so the nephew realizes that all of his uncle's dreams have been fulfilled. He feels that he now has no choice to become a prophet like his uncle wanted him to, so he does. Flannery O'Connor impacted American literature by pioneering the Southern Gothic genre. She's one of the first to popularize this genre. Another impact she had was her emphasis on religion, which people were starting to turn away from during her time, so she helped revive this. Lastly, her stories were realistic. Most of the things that happened in her stories were things that could actually happen in real life. She didn't include many supernatural events. Some of her common themes were violence, religious issues, and progression of human nature. All of the stories I looked at by her included at least one person being killed. Religious elements were a big part of all her stories because she was an Orthodox Catholic and was trying to spread her faith. Lastly, most of her stories questioned the decisions of humans to try and teach humans how to progress. She could have chosen to write about these themes because combining them allowed her to make her stories very intriguing yet disturbing, which seemed to be her goal. Flannery O'Connor and Edgar Allan Poe were similar in that they both wrote dark stories with strange and gruesome details. However, Poe did not share O'Connor's religious background, and he didn't include it in his writing. They both wrote about human nature, but Poe focused on the bad, such as self-destruction, while O'Connor focused on teaching lessons about how people can progress human nature. Poe also included a lot more supernatural elements compared to O'Connor's realistic approach. O'Connor's goal was to reveal grace, but Poe's was to expose the flaws of humans. The meaningful quote I found was, "I found out the crime don't matter. You can do one thing or you can do another. Kill a man or take a tire off his car, because sooner or later you're going to forget what it was you done and just be punished for it." This quote is said by the killer, and a good man is hard to find. He's basically saying that no matter what crime you commit, you will still face punishment. He's also implying that eventually you will forget the crime you committed and only be left with the lingering punishment. He believes that since you will be punished no matter what, you may as well make the most of life by committing the crimes you want to. O'Connor is using this example to contrast the grandmother in the story during this time. While the grandmother is being held at gunpoint, she is experiencing a state of grace, and she even accepts the killer as a child of her own. The already flawed personality of the killer helps to illustrate the errors in his view, because his sanity is automatically questioned due to the fact that he kills people. Flannery O'Connor used the killer as an example of what not to do. Some fun facts about Flannery O'Connor are that she lived on a peacock farm. She also wrote over 30 short stories. She never married or had children, which was pretty uncommon for her time. Her stories also won her many awards, including the O. Henry Award. She was a Georgia Woman of Achievement honoree, and she was also inducted into the Georgia Writer Hall of Fame. Flannery O'Connor was a Southern Gothic writer who included a lot of religious themes in her stories. Her stories were gruesome yet realistic in the fact that they could actually happen. Her style was different from a lot of contemporary authors, and overall, there haven't been a lot of writers like her.